Before Troy, before the clash of empires, there was an age of giants. Kings did not just rule, they commanded. They raised palaces that scraped the heavens, their walls pulsing with the glow of torches and the whispers of prophecy. Armies, clad in bronze, marched beneath banners woven with the names of gods. Their swords did not merely kill, they conquered. Their ships did not just sail, they devoured the waves, seeking riches and glory. This was the Bronze Age, a world where power was measured in metal and myths, where alliances were carved in stone, yet shattered like clay. And at the heart of this world, where the great civilizations met, one city stood like a jewel in the crown of empires, Troy. But why Troy? Why this city, this fortress, this kingdom? It was more than legend. It was destiny. Its name would be whispered by poets, cursed by kings, and fought over in wars that would shape history. Armies would drown the Aegean in blood, sailing toward its shores, not just for conquest, but for control. To understand the war, we must first understand the world in which it was fought. A world where geography was power, and a single whisper could ignite an empire's downfall. The Bronze Age was humanity's first dance with immortality. It was an era where gods walked with kings, and power was written in metal and stone. From the sun-scorched sands of the Nile to the fertile banks of the Euphrates, great civilizations rose, not by chance, but by conquest, ambition, and trade. Egypt's pharaohs did not rule. They declared themselves gods, their tombs built to defy time itself. In Babylon, scholars gazed at the heavens, mapping the stars while their armies carved empires into the earth. The Hittites, lords of Anatolia, forged iron from volcanic fires, wielding a power that would one day change the world. Gold glittered in their temples, chariots thundered through their streets. The pulse of civilization beat in every forge, every market, every throne. But this was not just an age of kings. It was an age of trade. Tin from Afghanistan, amber from the Baltic, ivory from Nubia. Treasures flowed like veins of power, binding empires together in a web of greed, diplomacy, and silent rivalries. And at the heart of this web, a city that controlled the breath of civilization, a city whose wealth made it powerful and whose power made it a target. Troy. Imagine a city straddling two worlds, standing at the edge of power itself. To the west, the Aegean, where Mycenaean ships prowled like wolves, their black sails billowing over the horizon. To the east, Anatolia, where Hittite chariots carved empires into the earth, their war horses drumming against the ground like thunder. And between them, the Dardanelles, a narrow, winding strait where every ship, every treasure, and every ambition passed through a single chokehold of power. This was no ordinary port. Troy was a fortress, a marketplace, and a kingmaker. Its warehouses overflowed with grain from the Black Sea, Cypriot copper, and Mesopotamian lapis lazuli. Cretan perfumers wove scents of rare oils through the streets. Egyptian envoys traded gold for secrets. Hittite spies listened in the shadows. It was a city of trade, of wealth, of whispers. But Troy's true power did not lie in its markets or its walls. It lay in its geography, in its control of the lifeblood of empires. To command Troy was to command the sea, to hold the keys to the richest lands of the Bronze Age. And what is power, if not the one thing every king, every empire, and every warrior desires? A truth that made Troy indispensable and a target. And as history has shown, every target is eventually struck. And when kings desire power, walls alone cannot hold forever. From the west came the storm. They called themselves Lords of War, their palaces crowned with lion gates that roared defiance at the gods. The Mycenaeans, warriors draped in bronze, their bodies glinting like living statues beneath the sun. To them, battle was not just survival, it was a path to glory. Their swords carved empires. Their shields bore the weight of conquest. Their kings did not merely rule, they sought to immortalize their names in the echoes of history. Their warships, carved with serpent eyes, prowled the Aegean, devouring the sea like starving beasts. Their warriors, hardened by fire and blood, sailed toward new horizons, not for gold, not for land, but for legend. And on the edge of that horizon stood Troy, a city that stood in their way, a city that choked their trade routes, hoarded wealth that could fill 1,000 tombs. It was more than a stronghold, it was an insult, an empire that refused to kneel. And, to the Mycenaeans, that could mean only one thing: war. But Troy was no orphan. To the east another power watched, an empire that called Troy Wilusa and vowed to crush any who dared claim it. But while the Mycenaeans sharpened their swords, another power watched from the east. A kingdom built not on bronze, but on iron and cunning. To the Hittites, the shadow over Anatolia, a kingdom not built by warriors alone, but by iron, diplomacy, and the will of the storm god. While the Mycenaeans raided, the Hittites ruled. They were not reckless conquerors, they were strategists, architects of empires, masters of war. From their mountain citadel of Hattusa, they orchestrated treaties and invasions alike. Their scribes, hidden deep in stone-carved archives, transcribed the whispers of kings and the threats of enemies. Etched in cuneiform, preserved in fire, to the Hittites, Troy was not a prize, it was a shield. They called it Wilusa, a vassal state at the edge of their empire, a wall against the rising power of the West. The Mycenaeans wanted it for themselves, but the Hittites would not yield so easily. When rebels stirred, Hittite legions marched. When treaties frayed, their emperors carved their warnings into stone. Cross us, and the storm god will feast on your bones. But even the mightiest empires rot from within. The cracks had already begun to spread. Droughts turned fields to dust. Rebellions festered in the shadows. And the Mycenaeans, they did what they did best. The Mai watched. They waited. They smelled blood. And they moved. Troy's wealth wasn't won, it was traded. It did not need to conquer. It let others do the fighting while it collected the gold. Every ship passing through the Dardanelles, a lifeline between the Aegean and the Black Sea, paid tribute to Troy. It was a silent tax on empire, a toll on ambition. Tin for bronze? Taxed. Egyptian linen? Taxed. Even the wind seemed to carry a price. But Troy was more than a marketplace. It was a stage. Here Mycenaean envoys spun lies over goblets of wine. Hittite agents whispered threats in temple corridors. Trojan merchants wove silk into gold. Kings and warlords played their hands beneath the shadow of Troy's towering walls, knowing that here, fortunes were not just made, they were decided. For centuries, this dance of shadows kept Troy safe. As long as it remained neutral, as long as its gates stayed open, as long as it remained a bridge, not a battleground, it would endure. Then the music stopped. The Hittites faltered. Their empire, once ironclad, began to crack. The Mycenaeans sharpened their swords, no longer content to be taxed, no longer willing to let Troy control their wealth. And Troy? It stood alone, a jewel circled by vultures, its walls, the final line between survival and oblivion. By 1250 BCE, the Bronze Age was unraveling, not with a whisper, but with a tremor, one that cracked the very foundations of empires. Drought strangled the land, crops withered in fields once blessed by the gods. Earthquakes toppled palaces, leaving ruins where kings once feasted. The world trembled, and in that trembling, power shifted. And Troy? It became a battleground of whispers. In Hattusa, the Hittite scribes recorded murmurs of rebel princes, vassals who once swore loyalty, now turning against them. In Mycenae, tablets carved in Linear B hinted at something darker. Ships prepared in secret, armies mustering in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. The air itself grew heavy with anticipation, thick with the scent of ambition and inevitability, inexority. And in the heart of it all, behind Troy's towering walls, King Priam paced. His fingers traced the ancient stones, stones that had stood for generations, now trembling under the weight of destiny. He had seen the signs. The letters from the Hittites were fewer now, their promises of protection hollow. The Mycenaeans were not just watching, they were preparing. Their fleets swelled, their forges burned day and night, and their war drums echoed across the Aegean. They circled Troy like wolves before the kill, waiting only for a spark. But stone cannot stop fate. A storm was gathering. Not of wind or rain, but of fire and steel. A war was coming, one that would consume cities, topple dynasties, and end an age. And it would not begin with a sword, but with Helen of Sparta, a queen whose flight would ignite the firestorm echoing across the Aegean. We have walked the labyrinth of Troy's golden age. We have seen the rise of empires, the clash of kings, and the city that stood at the heart of it all. But this is where the tale turns. The Mycenaeans are coming. Their warships slice through the Aegean, their warriors sharpen their blades beneath darkening skies. The Hittites are crumbling. Their empire, once mighty, now teeters on the edge of ruin. Their armies stretched thin, their allies silent. And Troy, it stands between them, a city on the brink, its fate no longer its own. But war does not begin with armies. It begins with ambition, with betrayal, with a single act that sets the world ablaze. And in the halls of Sparta, a queen's footsteps will echo across history, igniting a fire that will consume Troy and reshape the ancient world forever. War is here. Join us in episode 3 as we march with the warlords of the Aegean, the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, and the Eastern Mediterranean powers. Their rivalries, their alliances, and their thirst for dominance will drown Troy in fire. This is the story you think you know, but history is never that simple. The sands of time have buried many stories, but some battles never fade. Some wars never truly end. They only wait for another name, another city, another battlefield. Subscribe to Legacy of History. The truth is written in blood, and it begins now.